81 days of brutal fighting at the spearhead had driven the 3rd Armored Division into the fortified center of Münsterbusch. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Pool felt the erratic shudder of his 3rd Sherman's failing transmission grinding up through his boots. The radio was dead. The tank could give out any moment. And ahead, a German 88 blocked the column's path. Pool wasn't going to wait and find out. He leaned into the intercom and gave his driver the only command that mattered. Forward. The Sherman lunged out from cover, straight toward the traversing enemy gun. The emotions in this story are raw, they're real, and they hit different. I hope you connect with it the way I did. Make sure you're subscribed, grab a drink, settle in, and let's begin this journey. The Sherman's interior smelled of oil, sweat, and the peculiar metallic tang that came from being sealed inside 31 tons of steel under the French summer sun. Staff Sergeant Lafayette Green Pool shifted in the commander's seat, his broad shoulders pressed against the turret wall, and watched the Normandy hedgerows slide past through the vision blocks. Dense green walls. Nothing like the wide Texas horizons he'd grown up with. Back in Odom, you could see weather coming from 3 counties away. Here, you couldn't see past the next field. "War Daddy, we got any word on when we're moving up?" Corporal Wilbert Richards, Red to everyone who knew him, called from the driver's seat below. His voice carried that particular mix of boredom and tension that came from waiting. "When they tell us to move, we'll move," Poole said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. 25 years old, and he'd already turned down lieutenant bars twice. Officers gave orders from behind. He wanted to be here, with these men in this tank. Private First Class Bertrand Close, schoolboy, because he'd been studying engineering before the war, shifted in the bow gunner's position. "How's it compare to Louisiana, Sarge?" "Wetter," Poole said, "and the trees are meaner." Corporal Willis Aller, the gunner they called Groundhog, let out a short laugh. "Trees don't shoot back in Louisiana." "These don't either," said technician 5th grade Delbert Boggs from the loader's station. "It's what's hiding in them that's the problem." Jailbird, they called him, though nobody remembered why anymore. Poole had hand-picked this crew, trained with them through the California desert and the Pennsylvania hills, crossed the Atlantic with them last September. They'd practiced in the mud around Liverpool and Bristol until every movement became reflex. 5 men who knew each other's voices, habits, fears. 5 men who trusted each other enough to be sealed together in a steel coffin that the boys were already calling a Ronson, lights every time. Through the periscope, Poole could see the rest of 3rd Platoon, I Company, 32nd Armored Regiment, spread out in tactical formation. The Spearhead Division, they called themselves now. 3rd Armored. The triangle patch on every shoulder. Yellow for cavalry, blue for infantry, red for artillery. Tank tread, cannon, lightning bolt. Mobility, firepower, shock. They'd been in France since June, but this was the first time forward elements had actually engaged. 29th of June, 1944. 4 days ago, they'd gotten word. Combat Command A was going in near Villiers-Fossard, northeast of Saint-Lô. The hedgerow country, where German tank crews from 2nd Panzer Division were dug in deep. Poole ran his hand along the turret interior, feeling the metal warm under his palm. 3 days ago, this tank didn't have a name. Now, stenciled in white paint on the gun tube. In the mood. His choice. His crew had approved. It felt right, confident without being cocky, ready for what came next. "You nervous, War Daddy?" Close asked. Poole considered the question. Nervous wasn't quite right. Alert, maybe. Aware that everything they'd trained for was about to become real. That the theories about fighting panthers and tigers, about close-in tactics and crew coordination were about to get tested against people who wanted to kill them. "No," he said finally. "We're ready." And they were. The best trained tank crew in the division, if Poole had his way. They'd outshot every other crew on the range, outmaneuvered them in exercises. They knew their jobs. They trusted their commander. The radio crackled. Pool pressed the headset closer. "All Indigo units, this is Indigo 6. Movement to contact in 15 minutes. Enemy armor reported in the bocage. Stay alert and keep formation." Pool keyed his mic. "Indigo 3-1, roger." He looked at each of his men in turn, making eye contact. Red at the controls, hands steady. Schoolboy checking his bowgun one more time. Groundhog already sighting down the 75mm, running through the ranging sequence in his head. Jailbird with a shell halfway out of the rack, ready to slam it home. "Here we go, boys," Pool said quietly. The Sherman's engine rumbled to life, and they rolled toward their first battle. The hedgerows came at them like fortress walls. 8 feet high, centuries of root growth binding earth and stone into barriers that turned every field into a separate battlefield. Pool watched through the periscope as the lead tank in their column slowed, its commander searching for a gap. The radio net was quieter now, professional. Clipped reports of positions, distances, possible contact points. Intelligence said elements of German 2nd Panzer Division were somewhere in this green maze. Panthers, maybe. Tigers, if they were unlucky. "Traversing right," Groundhog murmured, the turret whining as he tracked potential threats. The 75mm gun swept across the hedgerow ahead. Pool felt the tank slow, then stop. Red's voice came up from the hull. "Road narrows here, Sarge. Single file from here on." Single file. Exactly what you didn't want in bocage country. One tank at a time, channeled by the landscape, unable to maneuver or provide mutual support. Pool had read the tactical assessments, knew what the brass was worried about. Sherman crews were learning the hard way that these French hedgerows negated every advantage they'd trained for in open country. "Keep sharp," Pool said into the intercom. "If we take contact, don't freeze. Return fire and back out." "Roger," came 4 voices, nearly simultaneous. The column lurched forward. Through the vision blocks, Pool saw hedgerow, road, hedgerow, a glimpse of Norman sky. The world reduced to green walls and the rumble of the Ford engine. His hand rested on the .50 caliber mount, ready. They'd been moving maybe 5 minutes when the lead tank reported movement. Pool tensed, finger near the trigger. Then small arms fire crackled somewhere ahead, sharp, distinct from the deeper boom they'd been expecting. "All Indigo elements, we have infantry in the hedges," the company commander's voice came through. "Advance with caution. Expect Panzerfaust." Panzerfaust. The word alone made every tanker's stomach tighten. Handheld, disposable, capable of punching through Sherman armor at close range. And in this terrain, every range was close range. Pool scanned the hedgerows, looking for any sign, movement, shadow, the telltale shape of a man with a tube on his shoulder. The Germans would wait until the last second, let the tank get close, then fire from ambush. 30 meters, 40 at most. One shot to brew up the crew inside. "Red, if I call reverse, you floor it. Don't think, just move." "Got it, Sarge." The tank ahead of them fired, the sound sharp even through the armor. Pool saw muzzle flash, then smoke. Couldn't tell if they'd hit anything. The hedgerows swallowed everything. "Contact right!" Schoolboy yelled. Pool swung the .50 caliber, saw movement in the hedge line 20 yards away. Fired. The heavy machine gun bucked against his shoulder, tracers tearing into the green wall. Whether he'd hit anything, he couldn't tell, but the movement stopped. They were rolling again, faster now, the driver knowing that speed might save them as much as armor. Pool's heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline sharpening every sense. This was it. This was real. Men trying to kill them, and them trying to kill back. Then the world exploded. The impact hit like a giant's fist against the side of the Sherman. Metal shrieked. Pool felt himself thrown against the turret wall, ears ringing from the blast. Smoke flooded the fighting compartment, acrid and choking. "Out!" Pool's voice, automatic, command without thought. Everybody out! He was already moving, muscle memory from dozens of evacuation drills taking over. Behind him, Groundhog was scrambling for the turret hatch. Below, he heard Red and Schoolboy abandoning their stations. The smoke thickened, and somewhere inside the hull, something was burning. Pool hauled himself through the commander's hatch, hit the ground running. The crew was with him, all 5 of them, moving fast away from the tank. Behind them, In the Mood sat silent in the road, smoke pouring from the hit on her flank. They made it 30 yards before Pool stopped, turned, counted heads. Red, Schoolboy, Groundhog, Jailbird, all there, all breathing. "Well," Red said, voice shaking slightly, "that was something." Pool looked back at their tank, his tank, hit and burning on a narrow French road. Then he looked at his crew, scared but unhurt, together. "Yeah," he said, "it was." They'd need a new Sherman. The second Sherman, in the Mood 2, they'd already stenciled on the gun tube, had a 76mm gun instead of the 75. Longer barrel, better penetration. Pool had received it within hours of abandoning the first tank, along with terse orders, "Get back in the fight." That had been early July. Now it was August, and the bocage was behind them. Operation Cobra had punched through the German lines at Marigny, and 3rd Armored was exploiting the breakthrough, racing south and east through country that finally opened up enough for tanks to maneuver. Pool had learned in those weeks between. Learned that aggressive tactics kept you alive. Get close. Get inside the enemy's decision cycle. Don't give them time to set up. Learned that the Sherman's weaknesses could be offset by crew skill and sheer audacity. Learned that hesitation killed more men than enemy fire. By the 7th of August, they were near Falaise, part of the great encirclement forming around German 7th Army. The Canadian and Polish forces were pushing south. The Americans were pushing north and east. Between them, thousands of German troops were trying desperately to escape before the jaws snapped shut. Pool's platoon had point, as usual. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson had taken to using 3rd Platoon as his hammer. Send Pool forward, let him find the enemy, then bring up the rest. It was dangerous work, but Pool preferred it. Better to see trouble coming than to stumble into it blind. The road ahead curved through a small wood. Pool studied it through binoculars from his commander's hatch. No movement visible, but that meant nothing. The Germans were masters of camouflage, and a well-hidden anti-tank gun could wreck a whole column before anyone spotted it. "Red, slow approach. Groundhog, traverse left. Watch that tree line." The Sherman eased forward, turret tracking, every man alert. The woods opened into farmland, and Pool saw it. A German column, vehicles packed nose to tail on the road heading east, trying to run before the trap closed. "Contact!" Pool keyed the radio. "Enemy column, 200 yards, heading east. Engaging!" He didn't wait for acknowledgement. "Groundhog, lead truck, fire when ready!" The 76 boomed. The lead truck exploded in a gout of flame and debris. Behind it, the column jerked to a stop, vehicles slamming into each other in panic. Pool saw troops spilling out, running for the ditches. "Traverse right, next vehicle! Fire!" Another hit. The German column was trapped now, vehicles blocking the road both directions, men scrambling for cover. Pool swung the .50 caliber, raking the ditches, not aiming at individuals, but suppressing, keeping heads down while Groundhog methodically destroyed vehicles. The other tanks in the platoon were pulling up now, adding their fire. The German column was being torn apart, trucks burning, half-tracks riddled with cannon fire, men dying in the open. It was slaughter, and Pool felt nothing about it except professional satisfaction at a job done correctly. Then a Panther rounded the curve ahead. "Tank!" Groundhog's voice, sharp. 700 yards! Pool saw it. The long gun, the sloped armor, the shape that made every Sherman commander's blood run cold. Head to head, the Panther outgunned and out-armored them completely. The smart play was to back up, use cover, wait for support. Pool had never been interested in smart plays. "Driver, forward! Groundhog, get me a shot at his flank!" Red gunned the engine. The Sherman surged ahead, closing the distance while the Panther was still acquiring them. Pool knew exactly what he was doing. Getting close, mixing it up, denying the German gunner the advantage of range and frontal armor. If they could get alongside, get a flank shot, the Panther fired. The round screamed past, so close, Pool felt the displacement of air. Groundhog was tracking, waiting for the angle. The Sherman was at 500 yards now, angling right, Red driving like he was born to it. "I got him!" Groundhog yelled and fired. The round caught the Panther on the side turret, right at the ring. Pool saw it penetrate, saw smoke billow from the hatches. The German tank slewed to a halt, crew bailing out as ammunition cooked off inside. "Keep moving," Pool ordered. The column was chaos now. Some vehicles still burning, others trying to flee, scattered groups of infantry attempting to organize a defense. Pool directed fire methodically. Tank here, truck there, infantry positioned to the left. His crew responded like parts of a machine. No hesitation, total coordination. The fight lasted maybe 15 minutes. When it was over, the road was a junkyard of burning vehicles and dead men. Pool counted later. 12 trucks, 4 half-tracks, 2 self-propelled guns, and 1 Panther destroyed. His platoon hadn't lost a tank. That night, back at the platoon position, Pool heard Lieutenant Colonel Richardson on the radio talking to higher headquarters. The words came through clearly. "My leading platoon, commanded by Sergeant Pool, is overrunning the enemy with such drive and dash that it leaves nothing for follow-up units to do." Red looked over at Pool from where he was checking the bogies. "You hear that, War Daddy?" Pool shrugged, already thinking about tomorrow's advance. Just doing the job. But he knew what Richardson meant. Get close, hit hard, keep moving. Don't give them time to set up. Don't give them space to breathe. That was how you won with a Sherman. Not with better armor, but with better aggression. It was working. So far, it was working. And Pool intended to keep it working for as long as this war lasted. The 3rd Sherman arrived on the 18th of August near Fromental. Pool didn't have time to paint the name before they were moving again. The gap at Falaise was closing, and every hour mattered. The Germans were trying to escape the pocket, flowing east in a desperate flood, and 3rd Armored was one of the hammers trying to shut the door. In the mood, 2 sat abandoned behind them, engine block cracked by a near miss that had shattered suspension components and sent shrapnel through the powertrain. They'd nursed it as far as they could, but the Sherman was done. Pool had transferred his crew to the replacement tank, ensured the name got painted on later, and kept moving. No time for sentiment. The war didn't pause for mourning machinery. By the 25th of August, they'd crossed the Seine. By early September, they were in Belgium, still pushing, still at the tip of the spear. Pool's platoon had led 21 major attacks, always first through, always taking point. The crew had settled into a rhythm, brutal, efficient, occasionally terrifying. They'd knocked out German armor, destroyed supply columns, scattered infantry formations. The tally kept climbing. But the Germans weren't beaten. Not yet. September 12th, 1944. The Siegfried Line. Pool had heard about it. The Westwall, the Germans called it. Pillboxes, dragon's teeth, tank obstacles, minefields, interlocking fields of fire. Miles of fortifications that the Germans had spent years building along their western border. 3rd Armored was tasked with punching through near Rutgen, finding a gap, exploiting it before the defenders could react. They'd fired the first American shell onto German soil 2 days earlier. Now they were trying to break into Germany itself. The approach was through dense forest, restricting movement to roads and cleared paths. Pool hated it. Too much like the bocage, too many places for ambush. But orders were orders, and 3rd Platoon had point again. "Movement ahead," Groundhog called. "Could be infantry." Pool peered through the periscope. Trees, shadows, the narrow road winding through the Hurtgen forest. Intelligence said the area was lightly held, The Germans had shifted forces to counter the British advance in the north, but intelligence had been wrong before. Keep moving. Stay alert. The forest opened slightly and Pool saw the first dragon's teeth, concrete pyramids designed to stop tanks, staggered in rows like giants' molars. Engineers would have to clear a path. That meant stopping, consolidating, losing momentum. That meant becoming targets. The first shell came from somewhere in the trees to their left. It missed, exploding 20 yards away, but the message was clear. The Germans knew they were here. Contact left! Groundhog! Suppressive fire into that tree line! The 76 boomed, high explosive rounds tearing into the forest. Pool couldn't see what they were hitting, but return fire slackened. Behind them, the rest of the column was deploying, tanks spreading out as much as the terrain allowed. For the next 3 days, it was grinding, exhausting combat. Not the rapid advances they'd made across France and Belgium, but bitter fighting for every 100 yards. The Germans had reinforced, brought up anti-tank guns, dug in infantry with Panzerfausts. Pool's platoon pushed forward, fell back, pushed forward again. The crew rotated sleep in shifts, never more than 2 hours at a time. They ate cold rations in the tank, relieved themselves in empty shell casings, lived in the constant noise of artillery and small arms. Pool lost count of the engagements. A half-track destroyed here, an anti-tank gun silenced there, infantry positions overrun and then abandoned as they pushed deeper. The strain showed on everyone. Red's hands shook when he wasn't driving. Schoolboy had stopped making jokes. Groundhog's eyes were hollow from lack of sleep. Jailbird moved like an old man when they finally got a chance to dismount. But they were still together, still fighting, still alive. On the 19th of September, they were pushing toward Münsterbusch, trying to exploit a gap in the German defensive line. 3rd Platoon was strung out along a forest road, each tank covering sectors, moving in bounds. Pool's Sherman was second in line, supporting the lead tank's advance. The afternoon was wearing on. Pool checked his watch, almost 3 in the afternoon. Another few hours of daylight, then they'd consolidate for the night, maybe get some real sleep. The German 88 came from a position they'd bypassed earlier. One shot, perfectly placed, catching the lead tank in the flank. Pool saw it brew up, flames shooting from every hatch. No one got out. "Reverse!" Pool ordered, even as Groundhog was traversing toward the threat. They needed to back up, find cover, suppress that gun before it killed them too. The second shell hit before Red could throw the transmission into reverse. Pool felt the impact more than heard it, a tremendous shock that threw him against the turret wall. His left leg exploded in pain. He looked down, saw blood, saw bone, saw his foot twisted at an angle that made no sense. The tank was still moving, Red reversing blind, trying to get them out of the kill zone. Pool grabbed the radio, his voice surprisingly steady despite the agony radiating from his shattered leg. "Indigo 3-1 is hit. Crew is bailing out." Groundhog was already helping him toward the turret hatch. Pool could see the concern on his face, could see the others moving to evacuate. 81 days. 81 days they'd fought together, and now he passed out before they got him clear of the tank, his last conscious thought that he'd failed them somehow. That after everything, after all the attacks and all the victories, he was leaving them. The pain took him into darkness. Pool woke in stages, first to pain, then to the smell of antiseptic and blood, then to the realization that he was no longer in the tank. The field hospital tent swayed slightly in the breeze. Voices murmured somewhere beyond his cot. A medic moved between the rows of wounded, checking vitals, adjusting morphine drips. His left leg was gone below the knee. He'd known it somehow, even before fully waking. The absence was too complete, too absolute. Where his foot should have been, there was nothing but bandages and phantom sensation, the ghost of a limb that had been shattered by German steel near Münsterbusch on the 19th of September, 1944. 81 days, from June 29th to September 19th. 81 days of continuous combat. And now, it was over. A doctor appeared beside his cot, a captain with tired eyes and blood-stained sleeves. "Sergeant Pool, you're awake." "My crew," Pool said. His voice came out rough, throat dry from anesthesia. "My crew, are they—" "All accounted for, all alive. They got you out and flagged down the medics." The doctor checked the bandages, his movements practiced and efficient. "You're going back to England for surgery, then probably stateside for recovery. The leg couldn't be saved." Poole closed his eyes. All alive. Red, schoolboy, groundhog, jailbird. They'd made it. 81 days in a Sherman, and they'd all made it. "How many?" Poole asked. The doctor didn't need clarification. "We're still tallying. 12 enemy tanks confirmed destroyed. At least 258 other vehicles, trucks, half-tracks, self-propelled guns. Rough estimate is over 1,000 enemy killed, 250 captured. Your platoon led 21 major attacks." The numbers felt abstract, distant. Poole thought instead of moments: the Panther near Falaise, the column on the road to Fromental, the Dragon's Teeth at the Siegfried Line. Thought of Richardson's voice on the radio, overrunning the enemy with such drive and dash. Thought of his crew, his boys, still alive because they'd trusted him and he'd pushed them hard and kept them moving. "There's paperwork coming," the doctor continued. "Awards, commendations, Distinguished Service Cross, they're saying, Silver Star, Purple Heart, others." He paused. "You did good work out there, Sergeant." Poole didn't answer. Awards were for later, for reflection. Right now, all he could think about was the absence, not just of his leg, but of the weight of command, the constant calculation of angles and ranges and threats. For 81 days, every decision had carried life and death. Now someone else would make those decisions. Someone else would command 3rd Platoon. Someone else would paint "In the Mood" on a new Sherman. The morphine was pulling him back toward sleep. He fought it for a moment, needing to know. The platoon. Are they still in the fight? "Last I heard, they're regrouping. New commander assigned. They'll keep pushing." The doctor's voice softened slightly. "War doesn't stop for any one man, Sergeant. Not even you." Poole knew that, had always known it. The mission continued whether you were there or not. 3rd Armored would keep driving toward Germany. The Siegfried Line would fall eventually. The war would be won without Lafayette Green Pool. But for 81 days, he'd been part of it. He'd led from the front, taken every risk he'd asked his crew to take, pushed harder and faster than anyone thought a Sherman could go. He'd proven that aggressive tactics and crew skill could overcome technical disadvantages. He'd shown that a tank commander who refused to back down could change the mathematics of armored combat. And his crew had survived. That mattered more than any tally of destroyed vehicles or enemy killed. 4 men who'd trusted him with their lives, who'd followed him into fire again and again, were still breathing. The morphine won. Poole felt himself sliding back toward darkness, but this time it wasn't the sudden shock of injury. This was different. Quieter, almost peaceful. The weight lifting from his shoulders felt strange after so long carrying it. His last coherent thought before sleep took him was of Texas. Wide horizons, clean air, the sound of wind across open land instead of the rumble of a Sherman's engine. He'd go home, eventually. After the hospitals and the rehabilitation and the fitting of an artificial leg, he'd go back to Odom, to the farm country where you could see weather coming from 3 counties away. But part of him, the part that had lived in a tank commander's seat for 81 days, that had learned to read terrain and enemy movement and the 1,000 subtle cues that kept men alive in combat, that part would never leave France. That part would always be there, in the forests and fields and roads where In the Mood had rolled to war. Poole slept and dreamed of Sherman engines and the voices of his crew. 22 months of hospitals and rehabilitation centers. 22 months learning to walk again, to balance on an artificial leg that never quite felt like part of him. The doctors were efficient, the physical therapists persistent, but Pool spent those months restless, incomplete. The war ended while he was still learning to navigate stairs without a crutch. May 1945, Germany surrendered. Pool heard the news in a rehabilitation ward in England, surrounded by other men learning to live with what the war had taken from them. He felt relief, satisfaction that it was over, but also a strange emptiness. 3rd Armored had gone all the way, liberated concentration camps, crossed the Rhine, pushed deep into Germany. They'd done it without him. By late 1946, Pool was back in Texas. The Army had given him medals, Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism, Silver Star for gallantry, Purple Heart with oak leaf cluster for wounds received. They'd pinned them on his chest in ceremonies that felt formal and distant, as if they were talking about someone else's war. He opened a filling station in Sinton, worked with his hands, pumped gas, fixed engines. It was honest work, familiar work. But it wasn't enough. In July 1948, 9 months before his 30th birthday, Pool walked into a recruiting office and re-enlisted. The recruiter looked at his artificial leg with skepticism, but Pool's record spoke louder than any disability. Transportation Corps, they said. Non-combat duties. Pool accepted, knowing it was a foot back in the door. General Roderick Allen, who'd commanded 3rd Armored during the war, helped him transfer back. By 1949, Pool was at Fort Hood, then Fort Knox, teaching new tank crews the lessons he'd learned in 81 days of combat. How to read terrain, how to make decisions under fire, how to keep your crew alive through aggression and skill instead of superior armor. The young tankers listened when Pool talked. They saw the medals, knew the statistics, 12 tanks destroyed, 258 vehicles, over 1,000 enemy killed. But what they really learned from him wasn't about killing. It was about leadership, about refusing to ask your crew to do anything you wouldn't do yourself, about pushing hard because hesitation got men killed. Pool taught them for more than a decade, instructed on tank tactics and auto mechanics, passed on everything 3rd Platoon had learned in the forests of France and Belgium and Germany. On September 19, 1960, exactly 16 years after the shell that took his leg, he retired from the Army as a chief warrant officer at Fort Sam Houston. The circle closed on the anniversary. Pool appreciated the symmetry. He tried civilian life again, attended business college, preached for $25 a week, coached Little League baseball, teaching boys about teamwork and discipline. He had a family now, wife Evelyn, 4 sons and 4 daughters. A different kind of command requiring different skill. But he never stopped being a tanker, never stopped being war daddy, the sergeant who'd led from the front, who'd turned the Sherman's weaknesses into strengths through sheer audacity. The Army still consulted him sometimes, asked his opinion on armor tactics, listened when he talked about crew coordination and aggressive leadership. On May 21, 1991, Lafayette Green Pool died in his sleep at home in San Antonio. He was 71 years old. They buried him at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery with full military honors, the flag, the rifle salute, the bugler playing taps. His obituary mentioned the medals, the combat record, the statistics. But what it couldn't capture was the essence of what he'd been, a Texas farm boy who became the greatest American tank ace of World War II, not through superior equipment, but through superior will. 3 Shermans named In the Mood, 5 men who trusted each other completely. 81 days that changed the mathematics of armored warfare. The numbers were impressive, but what mattered, what Pool would have said mattered if asked, was simpler than statistics. His crew survived. All of them. 81 days in a steel box facing Panthers and Tigers and 88s and Red and Schoolboy and Groundhog and Jailbird all went home. That was the real victory. Not the kills, not the medals, not the legend, just 5 men who went to war together and came back alive. War Daddy would have called that a job well done.